some dare call it conspiracy.
Welcome to the Some Dare Call It Conspiracy podcast, hosted by Brent Lee and Neil Sanders. After nearly 20 years exploring the world of conspiracy culture, we are taking our guests and listeners on a guided tour of the rabbit hole. Our mission? To discover where the truth lies.
New Zealand is a beautiful country. The Maori culture is rich and fascinating. Peter Jackson is one of the world's most successful directors. Lamb chops are awesome. And then there's Dan Wootton. He is to New Zealand what a steaming pile of manure is to a champion racehorse. Not that we can blame New Zealand for this, any more than you can blame the racehorse for its foul byproduct. But at least shit can be spread over the ground to aid the growth of roses. Wootton has no such use, unless we ground him down into very small particulate, which is not something that I completely object to. Why Dan Wootton? Why indeed? If I'm honest, I know very little about the man, and even that leads me to believe that he is surplus to requirements. I've been aware of him as a satellite in the orbit of various other loathsome commentators connected to the laughably inaccurately titled GB News. But Wootton doesn't rep that set anymore, for reasons that will become clear. In fact, it would be fair to say that Wootton feels somewhat abandoned by his old homies, and so has decided to drop, stop, shut them down, and open up his own shop, peddling exactly the same sort of xenophobic fear porn in an attempt to steal some of their audience and hopefully revenue too. Wootton often has the pained expression of a man who has been masturbating in a train's toilet, only for the automatic door to slide open and reveal him to the rest of the horrified carriage. He holds his hands in front of him in a manner reminiscent of an otter when they lie on their backs and feed themselves off their bellies whilst floating down the river. His shoulders seem to have a permanent hunch, like a fat man sat naked on the floor, staring despairingly at his own withered penis. He reminds me of one of those French clowns with the white hats and black pom-poms before they have put on their garb and applied their makeup. I have said before that he looks very much like a shaved cartoon hedgehog, like Mrs. Tiggywinkle, plagued with stress-induced alopecia, which is also surprisingly apt because the man is completely spineless. I wonder if his colleagues leave bowls of dog food for him in their gardens. There was a time when Wootton was considered quite the success, not as a human being or in any moral terms. I mean, he worked for the British tabloids, for Christ's sake, in the bin-diving, phone-hacking, blackmailing glory days. But what I mean is he probably earned quite a lot of money. Born in 1983. So he's younger than me. Jesus Christ. Anyway, born in Wellington, New Zealand, Wootton began his journalistic career at the Dominion Post and later on New Zealand's Good Morning TV show. I have to say that he is best suited to daytime TV. He's all no substance, soft edges and Zoloft smiles. But feeling that life just wasn't sleazy or intrusive enough to others' privacy, he joined the News of the World in 2007 and, I presume in a bid to let everyone know that he was a total bastard with no scruples, he also began to write a column for the Daily Mail. In 2012, he hit the big time and was called to testify at the Levinson inquiry to deny any knowledge of the tabloid industry printing illegally obtained stories and hacking the phones of murdered teenagers. Wootton said that none of his stories were gathered using deceptive means and that phone hacking had never been used, and as a member of the press, we must assume that he was being fair and balanced, unbiased and honest. Byline Times described Wootton in less than glowing terms. They said, "From Prince Harry and Meghan Markle to Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, from Philip Schofield to pop star Duncan James and the late tragic Caroline Flack, Wootton was Rupert Murdoch's celebrity attack dog for more than a decade." In 2013, he joined the Sun newspaper, and in 2015, he wrote the story Hollywood HIV Panic. He speculated that an unnamed celebrity was sleeping around, spreading HIV like a twisted Johnny Appleseed with a suspiciously high temperature, just for shits and giggles, really. There was zero evidence to back up this scandal-mongering story, and the more you thought about it, the less likely it was to be in any way true. It was just sensational nonsense designed to terrify people about HIV and stigmatize those with the disease. The Terence Higgins Trust called it irresponsible. Apparently, at least 6 people accused Wootton of bullying whilst working alongside him at The Sun. Incidentally, when looking at headlines about Dan Wootton, you can construct a word cloud of the most widely used terms. Surprisingly, the most common words are hypocrisy and twat, though in fairness, I should add that twat only appears if you add it several thousand times to artificially corrupt the outcome, which I did. I admit that this is unfair, and in many ways it renders the experiment completely inaccurate, but I felt that it conveyed the spirit of the thing rather well. In 2020, he became the host of a show on the irredeemably shit talk radio. The following year, as if determined to plumb the depths of every right-wing rabble-rousing, potentially Russia-financed, party-line-pumping, populist propaganda press outlet in the West, he joined GB News. Soon after this, Wootton's career started a downward trajectory that was more jarring than JFK Jr.'s jet. In 2020, the TV personality Caroline Flack tragically took her own life. Flack, who was building a career of her own in television, was subject to incredible scrutiny from the UK tabloids. The tabloids targeted her clothing, her physical appearance, her mental health, her romantic relationships, and her celebrity friendships. Flack had been arrested in December after allegedly assaulting her partner, Lewis Burton, with a lamp, and at the time, the Sun newspaper responded by plastering a picture of her bloodied bedspread across a double-page feature. It was not made clear that the blood was in fact Flack's from a self-inflicted wound. The impression was allowed to linger that the blood was from the assault on her partner. At the time, several people looked to members of the tabloid press to take responsibility for their actions. Many felt that figures within the media, such as gossip columnists or the media themselves, had essentially bullied the poor woman into her deeply unfortunate course of action, and some felt that this exposed a very dark aspect of the culture that the tabloid industry seemed to encourage. Wootton had regularly written about Flack during his time at The Sun, as had many publications, and after her death, he claimed that they were actually friends. But her ex-fiancé strongly disagreed, and he explained publicly that he felt that Wootton was in some way responsible for Caroline's tragic demise. He unfortunately took to harassing Wootton, and he also made several false statements about him, and was later jailed. In 2022, following the death of Queen Elizabeth, Wootton was roundly mocked for filming himself laying flowers outside Buckingham Palace in a display so performative and filled with crocodile tears that you wouldn't be surprised to see Peter Pan and Captain Hook stroll by. This clearly rehearsed and frankly embarrassing spectacle was made even worse by 2 factors. Firstly, despite being more awkward than a teenager caught watching porn by his parents, he'd actually been seen practicing this toe-curling production by members of the public who exposed this charlatanism on Twitter, and secondly, that he had previously mocked Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, who he hates for some reason, when they placed flowers in a Los Angeles cemetery. Wootton had stated, lucky that the photographer was there to catch this solemn moment. Words that hopefully seared into his soul with shame, but probably didn't, as this would require the capacity to feel shame. Wootton seeks engagement more cynically than someone seducing a septuagenarian for a green card. It was about this time that 3 incidents led to Wootton's career going off the rails like a cheaply constructed curtain. Wootton's life went so wrong so spectacularly that one hopes that he's trying to speedrun Buddhism, because if he isn't, bloody hell. GB News presenter Darren Grimes was suspended from the network after allegations of extensive sexual harassment against a straight and uninterested member of staff. Grimes was all set to walk away from the channel, but for some unknown reason, Wootton apparently went to bat for the young pest, and during a video call, strongly advocated for him to be kept on at the network. The member of staff who was harassed was given a job that kept him separate from Grimes. At around the same time, Wootton hosted a news program in which Lawrence Fox raised the philosophical question in regards to the journalist Ava Evans as to who in their right minds would shag that. Ofcom recognised that this was an age-old conundrum that has plagued the best and most brilliant minds of numerous ages, and begged Fox to marry their own daughters and impregnate them with his incredibly macho stock, and then everyone clapped, and they even let him have a go on the controls. In reality, Ofcom rightfully condemned the channel's misogynistic and frankly childish output, and this led to the sacking of both Wootton and Fox. Wootton was also relieved of the responsibility of continuing to write for the Daily Mail, which would give him plenty of time to indulge in his hobbies. Hobbies which, if the Byline Times investigation is accurate, are probably best left alone. Now, several things must be made clear. One, these are merely allegations, although the Byline Times sticks by its investigation into said allegations. Two, Wootton has completely denied all of these allegations. Three, the police investigated and found no wrongdoing. And four, certain newspapers have been sued by Wootton in regards to repeating more salacious aspects of these allegations. So, what does the Byline Times suggest has been happening? Well, the paper alleges that a former partner of Wootton's found a holdall containing USB drives that indicated that someone had been using the pseudonym Martin Branning to arrange certain intimate encounters online. Whoever this Martin Branning was, it is alleged that he was asking people to make sexual films, sometimes with unknowing partners. There was also a suggestion that certain adult film stars' profiles were used to set up liaisons with third parties that were then filmed, allegedly sometimes without all parties' consent. It has also been suggested by the Byline Times that Wootton approached young reality TV stars and offered them money for photo shoots for an underwear brand that he was apparently involved with. He explained that he, as an amateur photographer, would be conducting the photo shoots. This was considered in retrospect an abuse of power. Now, this obviously didn't happen, but one's mind can't help wander to nightmarish scenarios. Imagine working in the GB News offices. If allegations are true, you had the lingering spectre of Darren Grimes roaming the corridors like a demented Andy Pandy, and allegedly Wootton, the malevolent, sexually charged beanbag, floating after potential victims like those enormous white balloons that chased number 5 in the TV series The Prisoner. I reiterate that none of this happened. It would be horrific if it did, but it absolutely, definitely did not. Being kicked out of GB News is the journalistic equivalent of being asked to leave a P. Diddy freak-off party because you are simply too oily. Actually, in Wootton's case, that isn't entirely beyond belief. Anyway, it's definitely not going to fill you with confidence, that's for sure. But Wootton resisted the temptation to become a sad, grandiose, out-of-touch, embittered bag of piss, and instead set up his own channel, where he plots out exactly how he will punish those who wronged him when he is rightfully returned to the top of the media ziggurat. He has joined the pantheon of right-wing influencers that pushed it too far and had to set up on their own in a far more stripped-down and humiliating version of their previous life. They're like men who, having been asked to leave the family home and not contact the children, have got themselves a bedsit and fantasize about how great their life is, how they have all the opportunities in the world, and they were probably stifled by their previous responsibilities, all whilst cleaning your underwear in the sink using washing up liquid and crying into empty pot noodle containers. The even sadder thing is that there are men out there who follow these losers and aspire to be in some way like them, indicating that this country has a colossal problem with mental health, self-worth, and self-esteem. So Wootton took a leaf out of the golden era of his tabloid career and started talking about a topic with zero evidence presented to corroborate it. He implied that the Sun newspaper was hiding a secret about the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Now, Wootton was careful not to say what because of the supposed press injunction, but it was heavily implied that Starmer was having an affair, possibly a homosexual one, and that he had hidden this from his wife, who was now in the process of leaving him. It was clearly attention-seeking of the most desperate kind, but it appears to be the only card that Wootton is carrying. All of this made me think that people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, especially if you rely on the opacity of the walls to hide you sexually blackmailing your colleagues. I'm not saying that this is what he did, because according to the police, he definitely did not. I'm just saying that if you were going to do something like that, a glass house would be the worst place to conduct such an action. The Byline Times explained, according to the source, Wootton is an embittered former employee who is just trying to be a nuisance and to make money by running a conspiracy blog, and that it is the right thing to step in and call out this utter bollocks from Wootton. Another senior source at News UK told Byline Times that Wootton's claims are nakedly untrue and that he has no insights into the activity and decisions of this newspaper. They continued, no one here, certainly none of the executives who would know about any such matter, likes him or wants to talk to him. Another source at the newspaper said of the supposed arrangement, no such deal was done. It simply did not happen. This is complete fantasy. Not content with such an obvious and pathetic tactic, he also played the outrage card by claiming that the sentencing of Lucy Connolly was unjust. She is the wife of a Conservative councillor and was recently jailed for inciting racial hatred and encouraging others to burn down hotels where asylum seekers are placed on Twitter. She admitted intending to stir up racial hatred and encouraging violence and pled guilty, for which she received a sentence of 31 months. Wootton is using it as a way to appeal to those who felt that the racist riots, some of which have been dubbed the Farage riots, were justified. This feeds into the current fantasy that the right wing are unfairly disciplined for piddling things like trying to burn people to death, whilst other, more serious crimes go apparently unpunished. So Wootton's downfall was comparable to the sad downfall of comedian Fatty Arbuckle, and that is in no way a dig at Wootton's portly physique. It's obviously about the decline of a career. The case of Fatty Arbuckle in retrospect was even more tragic because, he was innocent. So is Wootton, obviously, which is why it's such a good comparison. I forget my original point. When life gives you lemons, you suddenly realise that making lemonade is far beyond your skill set, but pumping out xenophobic hate porn on the internet is a piece of piss. So, with all this in mind, I sat down to watch the latest episode of his show, Dan Wootton Outspoken, and fully expected to be bombarded with more racist dog whistles than the Queen's corgis. I was not disappointed, at least in that regard. The title is Nigel Farage will win May election, allies of PM Keir Starmer admit as they protect his big secret. I don't want to spoil anything, dear listener, but this is barely discussed. These allies almost certainly are a fabrication, as is the supposed big secret, which, probably on the advice of lawyers, is barely even alluded to. So Wootton appears on the screen, dressed like a villain from EastEnders, looking a little bit like John Lovitz's stunt double. He has the insincere smile of a modelling agent that knows that following your brief photo shoot, you will awaken in a bathtub filled with ice, missing a kidney. When Wootton really smiles, he looks exactly what I imagine Winnie the Pooh would look like if he had all the skin flayed off his face. Wootton is so slimy that I wouldn't be surprised if he moves everywhere on a track of mucus, like some gargantuan, talentless snail. It has been said that Wootton is about as reliable a source as P.T. Barnum, but at least P.T. Barnum was entertaining, whereas Wootton is about as entertaining as the bizarre procedure in which Barnum sawed a monkey in half and sewed its torso to a fish to recreate a mermaid. The most remarkable thing about Wootton is how incredibly unremarkable Wootton is. Some are said to drip charisma. Wootton appears to have taken that a step further and shed it completely. The set looks like Wootton is the receptionist at a nail bar, and the lighting makes him look like a creme brulee with 2 buttons for eyes. He's a total puddle of a man, and he has this incredible talent that allows him to fluctuate between having no and several chins, sometimes simultaneously. The show is about as cutting edge as an Albanian washing machine. It opens with Nigel Farage complaining that a man with an AK-47 tattooed on his face might be on his way to the UK. Why this bothers Farage is anyone's guess, as he spends less time in his constituency than Donald Trump spends with his children. Wootton has the bizarre mixture of anxiety and insincerity, like a SeaWorld worker who is cheerfully trying to explain to the children that they won't see the orca today because he's dead, having choked to death on the corpse of his trainer. So, Wootton sounds off like a suckling pig of doom.
It's panic stations, folks.
Oh, good, I think. He's finally taken stock of his life. But no, he continues.
Scandal Starmer, whose first 100 days has been the biggest political disaster in modern British history.
This is true if you ignore the entirety of British history, particularly the most recent 14 years of corrupt Tory rule.
A man who is obsessed.
Is he talking about himself?
With ensuring the MSM doesn't reveal his big secrets.
He could be talking about himself.
Well, he is facing an electoral disaster.
Oh, he's talking about the Prime Minister.
Starmer's own allies told the Sunday Times yesterday that they are worried, and I think they're worried for good reason, that Reform UK will overtake Labour by the time of May's local elections.
So we see the format for the show. Delusional fan fiction for the feeble-minded and those overly concerned with racial purity. Also, we know this story, which I couldn't find, possibly due to me putting absolutely no effort into the task, is most likely not entirely accurate, if not completely made up, because it is attributed to sources close to the PM.
They know a political tsunami led by Nigel Farage is coming.
What a disgusting thought.
As the silenced majority rise up.
Well, I imagine they don't want to get any on their shoes. So anyway, that's the thrust of young Wootton's argument. The current PM is extremely unpopular, and that Reform, the least popular political party in the country, is actually surprisingly well thought of. And if you don't believe him, why not look at these polls conducted by Reform members, directed solely at sad, embittered echo chambers full of Reform voters? That proves this, surely. Still not convinced? Well, here's a tweet from known liar, fat bastard, and alleged, but for legal reasons not proven, Russian stooge, Aaron Banks, the one connected to the deceptive mind control firm Cambridge Analytica and the fraudulent Leave EU campaign. So put that in your admittedly enormous pipe and smoke it. Honestly, this show is the political equivalent of your mum telling you that you're cool. Then, a pre-recorded segment on the failures of Keir Starmer starts.
How much can you get done in 100 days? Quite a lot. Here are just a few of the things our amazing new Labour government has achieved since the 5th of July. 1. We voted to strip millions of pensioners of their winter fuel allowance and voted to cover up the impact, so we have no idea how pensioners will be affected.
To be fair, I tend to agree that there are other areas where money could be raised without having to deny pensioners of support during winter. I personally would make the wealthy and corporations pay their fair share of tax, but I strongly suspect that Wootton would not agree with that tactic. Regardless, this is childish and totally ignores the billions wasted by Tory government cronyism, the COVID VIP lanes, I could go on. This isn't looking for solutions. It's just political point scoring at the most base level.
2. We've taken hundreds of thousands of pounds of freebies from donors for new glasses, clothes, football matches and Taylor Swift tickets.
Again, this has all been declared and is all above board. If you want to talk to me about removing all lobbying and all gifts for MPs and even government expenses, this is a conversation that I'm more than willing to have. But it isn't. It's also enormously hypocritical to have the grifter-in-chief Nigel Farage, a man known for swindling every freebie and cash incentive out of political roles for the least effort, as a guest on the show. It's like having Russell Brand as a chaperone, or James Corden advising people about talent.
3. We've talked down the British economy and destroyed consumer confidence.
Have we? In the last 100 days? If that was true, which it absolutely is not, then it implies a particularly precarious economy. Is this the same economy that Liz Truss managed to tank in an afternoon? This is pure delusion. In reality, we've just had an investment summit that was very well received, and inflation has begun to dip after 14 years of mismanagement.
4. Your energy bills have gone up, and we're no longer promising to cut your bills by £300.
Yeah, there's a war going on in the Ukraine, and we could get into who's been spreading lies about that and sticking up for Russia, often by repeating propaganda points directly from the Kremlin. But I don't see how that would be a fruitful use of our time. Do you think so, Dan? Maybe we'll have a détente on that one for now.
5. We've made Labour voters for life by releasing thousands of prisoners from jail and onto our streets. Some of them have even already gone on to reoffend.
Where to begin with this bollocks? Well, the ones who reoffend probably won't be available to vote. And this was a conservative government policy. And it was only people nearing the end of their term who were released. And we needed to free up some space because the just asking questions, definitely not right wing or populist lot, felt that it was appropriate to try and set fire to mosques and asylum centres because a Christian born in Wales had stabbed a couple of children. Yes, it really was as stupid as that last sentence sounds, and was encouraged by twatty influencers online, not hugely dissimilar to our greasy, wild-eyed host.
6. Our plan to smash the gangs has led to the highest number of illegal migrants crossing the channel in a single day in 2024.
Oh, for fuck's sake, are we really doing this again? This is about as current as the happy hardcore rave scene, Benetton sweaters and kicker boots. It has long been the tactic of the far right to appeal to people's ignorance by confusing the concept of immigrants, illegal immigrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. In the minds of these idiots, these terms are interchangeable, as are the phrases foreigner or the concept of people of colour. The truth of the matter is depressingly simple. The previous government removed the legal asylum routes that are required of any decent country to assess people claiming refugee or asylum status due to seeking shelter from persecution. What the Tories did was to remove this, thus providing no legal and only potentially illegal means to get to this country. And they did this on purpose, to create the impression that migration of any kind is unfettered and causes far more problems than it actually does. It's like shitting yourself on the bus and then loudly complaining that the bus smells of excrement, and this is likely due to foreigners. Wootton knows this, and he's up to his neck in human shit. Sadly, only metaphorically.
7. An infighting has forced Keir Starmer to sack Sue Gray after only a few months in the job. That's Labour's first 100 days. Change for the worse.
That's a bit fucking rich, seeing as just recently Ben Habib, a man who advocated murdering asylum seekers, was ousted from reform by its chairman Richard Tyson, now Nigel Farage, who wanted more control and, as some have suggested, more of an opportunity to fleece their gullible supporters. That is not necessarily my opinion. Habib said bitterly of the decision, "It's not about my position in the party, it's the mechanisms by which decisions were made that concerns me, and that should concern everyone, because if you want a party that is going to deliver the promises it has made, it must be governed properly." Then it cuts back to Wootton, who giggles like a schoolgirl who has stumbled across a stash of dirty pictures, and he says with a beaming smile that hints strongly at psychopathy.
And of course, the invasion of the UK via the Channel gets worse by the day, with seemingly no way for Starmer to smash the gangs.
Perhaps this is valid criticism. If only the government would do something like setting up process centres to deal with the backlog created by the previous government, then we could begin to tackle the problem.
Indeed, Labour, or maybe I should call them Liber.
Fucking hell. This man has a witty grasp of wordplay that would rival the genius of Oscar Wilde. One wonders why he isn't on our screens more. Oh, it was all about unpleasantness, wasn't it?
Indeed, Labour, or maybe I should call them Liber, is going to agree a 6-year contract worth £521 million to manage 2 migrant processing sites in Kent.
Oh, that's awkward. I mean, that would go towards solving the problem that apparently you care about so much, wouldn't it?
And as Guido Fawkes pointed out, classic instance where what they say in public and what they expect in private are very different. Labour and government don't expect to smash the gangs. In reality, they plan on the basis that the boats keep coming, no change.
This is so juvenile. What they want is for the boats to be stopped with force, possibly with violence. Reform candidates and people in the media sphere have literally called for this, rather than to deal with the problems like adults, treating humans as, humans. In this regard, Wootton should feel free to lay his enormous fish-white frame in the water as some sort of deterrent barrier, if he feels that would help. On another point, if Guido Fawkes, which has been described as a cross between a comic book and propaganda, is really that bothered about the state of the country, they could just pay some tax. Just saying. This is why Wootton is so dangerous. I mean, sure, he looks like a wind-up teddy bear and has all the soft Vaseline lens edges of daytime TV. But he spits vile rhetoric. He has the appearance of respectability, even being slightly dull, but there's dangerous intent. He's like a petty fool with a razor blade in it. Every time Wootton smiles, I'm reminded of Harold Shand at the end of The Long Good Friday. Shand, played by Bob Hoskins, is in the back of a car being led to his death by IRA assassins. His face is a masterclass of conflicting emotions that he tries to hide behind a self-assured smile. But like Shand, Wootton can play nonchalant and put on a brave face if he likes, but just as in the film, it's obvious that he realizes the situation is dire. The program is simply terrible. It's the equivalent of getting a dog by the head and going, "Who's the bestest boy?" But in this case, the dog is an audience of feeble-minded racists. It's just sad for all involved, particularly Wootton. It's sadder than Leonard Cohen solemnly telling you that he's just ran over your puppy. Then I am alerted to the presence of Nigel Farage on screen, as I can literally taste the nicotine in my mouth. And he's ranting about the man from the beginning. But this show has all the professionalism of a Charles Lemonade stand, and so there is no reference to who he is talking about.
Is this the kind of person we want to come and live in our country? Is this the kind of person you would like to move in next to you?
But the only person on screen is Farage, so it looks like he's berating himself in a rare moment of clarity. Farage is actually talking about a man called Madhupasa, who is making TikTok videos charting his attempt to cross Europe with the apparent intention of getting to the UK. He sports a tattoo of an AK-47 on his face and has videos where he's surrounded by women and guns, and is known for making braggadocious claims in said videos, so it's entirely possible that the young man is simply a SoundCloud rapper. He certainly ticks all the required boxes. Wootton then attempts to have a discussion about Farage and the prospective Conservative leader Robert Jenrick about whose rhetoric surrounding immigration is the strongest. Both favour mass deportation, which is not a thing that any sensible person would consider, but provides a powerful and unattainable image for idiots to strive towards achieving. This is all, again, about dehumanizing people through lies, and rather than process applications in a legal manner, to advocate and normalize forcing people into a watery grave. The main concern that Wootton raises is, can we really trust Jenrick to be as sociopathically unconcerned with the lives of potential asylum seekers as he might be? Or are we going to have to put up with occasionally seeing a foreign person? Wootton bolsters this section with tweets discussing the same issue. Tweets. This is not a serious man, and this is not a serious show. Wootton is like a child wearing his mum's coat as a makeshift cloak, and now he thinks he can fly like Superman. God, this is depressing. This is sadder than a suicide note scrawled on the back of a tear-stained sonogram. But now we have a promised interview section called Uncancelled, which promises to be good. And I use the word promise in the same way a deadbeat dad promises to turn up to your birthday party. The guest is Ben Walker, who is the chairman of UKIP, a grim and irrelevant far-right political party that used to have Roy Kilroy Silk as a leader and never really recovered from that.
And I'm delighted to be joined today by the chairman of the aforementioned United Kingdom Independence Party, better known as UKIP, Ben Walker. He is a former Royal Navy veteran and businessman.
Well, this is awkward, straight off the bat. You see, Walker was in the Navy, but he has committed the cardinal sin of stolen valour. In the past, UKIP publications elevated his rank from that of LSA, which is a corporal, to petty officer, which is a sergeant. It has been suggested by some angry veterans that Walker did this himself too, but I cannot personally find a record of this. He has also been accused of being slippery about the facts regarding where he served. He did not correct Russia Today when they said that he had served in Afghanistan. He had not. Though he did serve as part of the Afghanistan campaign, just not in the country. Some geography enthusiasts might reason that Afghanistan would be unlikely to have direct contact with naval fleets on the account of it being landlocked. As regards his business was that of a rogue builder who has criminal convictions for breaching building regulations. He didn't declare these criminal convictions, which led to him being sacked from his position as a magistrate. And it's at this point that I noticed that the red, white and blue graphics chosen for the show and the way in which the two are framed on screen makes it look like there is a Russian flag behind the pair, which is strangely apt. Anyway, Ben and Dan are sat there, framed by the billowing Russian flag, and I can't help notice what Walker has on the wall of his study. He has one of those genuine frames of film from a movie, and it appears to be Scarface, the Al Pacino film about an immigrant who goes to the USA and, in a flourish of disco and cocaine, achieves the American dream. Next to that is a hand-painted picture of Arnold Schwarzenegger, the immigrant who conquered Hollywood and eventually became a politician in the country that he wasn't born in. And next to that is a picture of Edward Teach, more commonly known as Blackbeard, who was a fucking pirate. Now, he's not going to be stupid enough to talk about immigration sat in front of celebratory pictures of two well-known immigrants, granted one is fictional, and a man whose livelihood was in boat-based thievery, is he? Because that would be screamingly ironic. Yes, he is. He is also in favour of mass deportations. Of who exactly or where to is not entirely clear, nor is it important. What is important is that you feel sufficiently threatened by these fantasies. But first, Wootton wants to clear up whether he is supportive of Nigel Farage, who also used to lead UKIP, or are they now in direct competition?
Of course, we're supportive of what Farage and Reform are trying to do and say. I guess there is an issue for us in terms of, yes, we are ultimately in competition with them. What you won't know is we're actually sort of rewriting or have rewritten our manifesto, which is currently being proofread and all that sort of jive.
Shit. Honky Muffy messing my old lady. Got to be running cold upside his head. I'll bet that's not in the manifesto.
So we're actually going down a very, very radical road at the moment. We're going to say those things, the politically unsayable things that maybe even Reform are going to struggle to wrap their lips around.
He's talking about the N-word, isn't he? Christ, like the ghost of a crying child. This is all depressingly transparent.
We're the only party really at the moment which are fully committed to deportations.
I'm telling you, we're a hair's breadth away from suggestions to rehome people in Nicaragua for Lebensraum. I mean, for God's sake, we already suggested Kenya. The parallels are actually alarming. The pair then bitch about how hard done to they are. It's like reading extracts from an unpopular teenager's diary. Honestly, this is sadder than a nail bomb at a petting zoo.
There is a massive erosion of our very culture at the moment, at a rate of knots that nobody has ever seen. And that simply cannot continue.
Wootton then raises the fact that public hate preachers like Katie Hopkins and Tommy Robinson were considered so toxic and overtly bigoted that Reform has shunned any association with them, whereas UKIP has gone the other way and embraced these figures and their supporters. Wootton reiterates that those two are not welcoming Reform, but Walker has no such qualms.
I mean, we have to be honest and recognise that these people, these patriots, they are our core base. They are our voters. And they're not people at all. These are people that just believe in the country. They're not far right. They're just right so far.
Wootton squeals with delight like a French king watching a slave being tortured. I mean, come on. They are far right. Even Reform, the far-right political party, has recognised that Hopkins and Robinson's brand is too toxic even for them. This is just pathetic. Basically, UKIP is saying, yeah, we'll take any old shit. We're so irrelevant. And we don't even have to lie like Nigel Farage. We can be honest about our racism and bigotry. They're so desperate for support. They're like the National Front off Wish. Clearly, they have abandoned any concept of the master race as completely unrealistic and are aiming for the dregs instead. The Hitler Youth and those girls doing calisthenics have been replaced by a vision of varicose veins and high blood pressure, roll-up fags, dirty tracksuits, and coughing up bloody sputum. Instead of blood and soil, it appears to be scabs and mud. If you are white, thick, and have any hatred to spare, they can probably accommodate you. Walker then continues.
Farage has got sort of blood on his hands, if you like.
And Wootton looks like a badger caught in the headlights of an articulated lorry as he genuinely panics that Walker is going to bring up the recent race riots in the UK that some have dubbed the Farage riots simply because he was absolutely instrumental in creating the atmosphere where such an act occurred. But Walker continues.
He kind of created a power vacuum. So any opposition to Nigel whilst he was leader was stamped out. When he decided he was going to leave, that created a huge problem for us because there was no natural successor. There was no evident sort of talent within the party.
On this, I totally agree. They are a talentless shower of shit. Wootton then claims to be very impressed by UKIP and claims that he thought that their former leader, Neil Hamilton, was brilliant, and it's difficult to figure out if he is being witheringly sarcastic or is actually a complete imbecile. Hamilton was famously labelled a liar and a cheat in newspaper headlines, such impressive notes on his CV as being opposed to the removal of lead from petrol. Wootton then asks Walker if UKIP are simply a pressure group or do they aspire to having members in Parliament? And I presume he means the political organisation, not the funk band fronted by legendary George Clinton. I suspect UKIP members would simply hate that. Then, before he can answer, and with absolutely no prompt, it cuts to Wootton doing an advertisement for some rubbish-looking wellness product that seems to offer cures for all ailments. Now, I'm not saying that it's snake oil, but according to Wootton, this product makes him feel youthful, full of energy, and with enhanced cognition. Fuck me. Imagine how bad this show would be if he wasn't ripped to the gills on performance-enhancing chemicals. Apparently, the product has helped Wootton lose weight too. One couldn't possibly comment. And then there is a black and white picture of Wootton, looking for all the world that he is about to be put up against a wall and shot, next to a blurb extolling the seemingly miraculous compound for sale. How the mighty have fallen. This is absolutely tragic. It's more depressing than Robert Smith of The Cure delivering a neatly folded flag to your home on the day that you had planned to host your daughter's now redundant wedding. We then cut back to Walker, but as the editor has all the finesse of a rat catcher's hammer, we don't get a repeat of the question. This is about as professional a media outfit as a busker's dog.
Question.
Was it? I can't remember.
And it's probably both.
He adds unhelpfully.
So we definitely want to win seats at the next election.
Oh yeah, that's what he was babbling about. You have to admire his optimism, even if there are more realistic prospects of Dan joining the Westboro Baptist Church than UKIP becoming a political party of any reasonable stature. At this point, Ben's feed starts to break up, which makes his message no more or less coherent, but doesn't make for good telly. Wootton assures us that he will be back once the line has improved, but thankfully this is a lie. I've seen open mic poetry nights with slicker media expertise than this, and I've watched better produced nativity plays. Honestly, Wootton's life is sadder than the last dead panda. The thing that really shocks me is how talentless Wootton actually is. He is a beige disaster of a man. Like a fluffer with carpal tunnel syndrome, he's a totally inept wanker. He just isn't very good at presenting. He can't decide if he wants to be fluffy or the harbinger of doom. And it's jarring, like being mugged by Elmo from Sesame Street. What's clear is that more than anything, he craves attention, which makes this absolute tragedy of a show even more hilarious and pathetic. It's more depressing than a baby chimp beating on the chest of its dead mother. The format is clearly cobbled together too, with any vague content that can be spun to rile up the audience crowbarred into the running order. Here's Farage being a dick, and then here's some anti-immigrant sentiment, and then here's this other dickhead. Here's a tweet that might anger you all of it's wrapped around Dan fucking Wootton. I'll tell you what I like to see wrapped around Dan fucking Wootton is barbed wire and electrical tape. But that is just one of the reasons that this show probably isn't aimed at me. The show is less than half an hour long, but it's incredibly dull, and it's got no really interesting bits. Most of it is just padding and filler, and the results are not what anyone wanted. It's like the Bogdanov twins' faces. To highlight this, the penultimate section is so forced that it barely even works for Wootton's agenda, but he has nothing else, so by Jove, he's going to try and make this relevant. He shows a video of Labour MP Nadia Whitmore and claims that this is the type of criticism that Starmer will have to face. It doesn't really work, but he hasn't let facts get in the way of the show yet, and he isn't going to start now. Nadia Whitmore made a video suggesting that ancient barracks in the middle of nowhere might not be the best place to house asylum seekers, as the facilities more resemble a prison than anything else. She advocates for treating human beings as human beings, and she wants an asylum process with compassion at its heart to provide safe legal routes. Evidently, she is dangerously berserk. As Wootton argues,
there is nothing compassionate about that woman. That woman is insane because of what she is suggesting. Shut down all sites. Do you know what that means?
Yes, it means that we place people in adequate facilities while we fairly process their application for asylum. Frighteningly lunatic.
The illegal migrants in your community. I mean, this is already happening. It's called Operation Scatter. You won't hear anyone in the mainstream media or the government talk about it.
Well, I mean, it was a government idea that was reported on in the Times, but do go on with your bollocks. Also, can you believe that it wouldn't work like Wootton suggests, even if it does happen, which there is no indication that it will? Basically, the government has seen the potential problems caused by large centres like the ones people recently tried to burn down, so have suggested instead smaller centres with less occupants. Obviously, these will not burn as ferociously, which I presume is the crux of Wootton's argument, because if not, he makes less sense than a Captain Beefheart song.
The idea is to spread out the illegals into every community so that you have no idea where they are.
But wouldn't that imply successful integration? If you can't find these people, why would that be a problem, even in Wootton's fevered version of reality?
And let's be honest, we know that many of the people flooding in are terrorists, are rapists, are criminals. Some are even murderers. And she wants them in your community.
Suffice to say that she does not want this. This is the tragedy of Wootton's latter career, lying to the cretinous for attention. The positive takeaway is that, talentless as he may be, Wootton is not stupid. He can see the failing trajectory of his life and is powerless to set it back on track. He's like a doomed cosmonaut. He had an incredible opportunity and got to see things that others can but dream of. But now there is a worrying glow permeating the windscreen, and his feet are getting uncomfortably hot. Dan Wootton's life is sadder than a policeman telling a toddler that they can't have their Christmas present because it's covered in DNA that hopefully will solve their parents' murder-suicide. Then Andrew Lawrence comes on the screen. This alleged comedian is about as funny as an Ebola outbreak at a scout jamboree and has the radical approach of not having any jokes in his act. Unless he is being put through a wood chipper feet first, I fail to see how anything involving him would constitute entertainment, and so I refuse to endure any more of this mediocrity.